Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the unhinged Vaughn Manor, where today Roger and myself are here to talk about physical books and more specifically my physical TBR. In fact, my entire TBR for the 500 book challenge now is all going to be physical books. That's right, no digital content for me and Roger. Why? Well, you probably know if you watch my dumb videos. The last couple videos I did, I went on and on about how evil Amazon was, and how bummed I was about it as a company and digital rights management and all of that jazz. I went on and on about it. So, you could watch those two videos, if you want to suffer, or you could forget it. But the gist is that from now on, and actually going back to the beginning of the 500 book challenge that I'm doing, the 500 book challenge, in case you don't know, is a challenge that I'm in or that I'm doing, where I have to read 500 books that I already own before I buy any new ones. It's a long-term challenge that's going to take a long time. And I was counting ebooks, because I've got a lot of them, or do I? Well, I was counting ebooks, and now I'm not, basically. And after my last video, many people had opinions about this. Many people asked if many people said I was overthinking this whole situation. Yes, that's what I do. I overthink. And, I actually had a couple people ask me if I were crazy. Yes, the answer is yes, obviously. But, I am going to be reading only physical books from now on. For the 500 book challenge, I was at 31 books. Had to take one book off because it was a Kindle book. It was an ebook that I read for the challenge, and I'm taking that away, so that knocks me down to 30. Right now I'm reading Wolf Hall, which is book 31. Pretty good book, actually. I look forward to talking about that one. That one's interesting. But this switch to only physical books is going to change things up. It's all physical here at Vaughn Manor from now on, and that is going to change things up. One thing is that I will be reading all the books for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, the greatest book club in the known universe. It's very cheap. I'll be reading all those physically. Although, if I were to download something from Project Gutenberg, every book in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club is available for free from Project Gutenberg. That would be all right. Project Gutenberg is a good thing, and you can always download any book available from Project Gutenberg to any device of your choice, and I could do that if I didn't have a physical copy, but I do have physical copies of every book that Roger and I are doing for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, and I'm going to be talking about the books I will be reading, and this is just kind of a talk about, not just the physical books I'll be reading, but some thoughts I've had, some evolving thoughts about how I'm going to be reading from now on. Roger's Cheap Old Book Club first, though. So we've already read this one. This was my physical copy of The Prisoner of Zenda. This was for February, the first book in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. This month, in the book club, we are reading The Forgotten Planet by Murray Leinster. It's gotten some mixed reviews. I enjoyed it. I already read this book, and it was a lot of fun. It is not a perfect book. It has a couple things which I'll be talking about, but altogether fun. I mean, look, they're fighting giant bugs. How bad can it be? But it's gotten some mixed feedback. Old Murray Leinster, the dean of science fiction. And if you want to read this book, man, like I said, you can get it for free off Project Gutenberg. And You could talk about it if you like with some other fellow readers over on my Dopey Discord, which I'll try to remember to link down below. And then next month, a kind reader sent me this. This is The New Arabian Nights by Robert Louis Stevenson. I was sent this very beautiful 1909 copy of New Arabian Nights with this cool photo of Robert Louis Stevenson there. So yeah, I've got a copy that's over 100 years old, and I will be reading this copy. Then, after that, let's see, January, February, that's March and April. No, wait, never mind, I'm losing track. Where's my list? I have a list here. Okay, May is this one, The Three Imposters. The Three Imposters I have in this book. This is Arthur Machen, The Collected Fiction, Volume 1, 1888 to 1895. This was a 3-volume set that was published by Hippocampus Press and edited by S.T. Joshi. So I have The Three Imposters in this. After that is going to be The Lone Star Ranger. I have that book somewhere. Where is my copy of The Lone Star Ranger? I know I have that book. Here it is. It was in the wrong place. The Lone Star Ranger. Now this is for June on the Range, a month devoted to reading Western fiction. This is my physical copy of The Lone Star Ranger. Actually, I've got a couple of these. I have this in a big omnibus set too. Then July is The Last Man, and I've got The Last Man in the collected supernatural fiction of Mary Shelley. In this volume, I have a copy of her novel, The Last Man, which is actually kind of long. I think it might be the longest book in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. I'll have to check on that. But yeah, that's in there. Mary Shelley's The Last Man. Then in August is Gladiator by Philip Wiley, or The Gladiator in this case. But Gladiator by Philip Wiley from 1930. This is the novel that probably inspired Superman and many other superheroes, about a fella who develops superpowers. And it doesn't go the way you think, from what I hear. In September is The Exploits of Brigadier Gerard. I have that. That's the first half of this book. This is the complete Brigadier Gerard. Has both the Brigadier Gerard collections from Arthur Conan Doyle. That's going to be in September. Then it's the Ghost Stories of an Antiquary. Ghost Stories of an Antiquary. I can barely speak. From M.R. James. This copy, I have the complete M.R. James, but I actually found this over at the local recycling center. At the local recycling center, they have this space set up for books. And if you just want to get rid of your books, you take it there, and there are shelves set up, and people can come and take the books that you don't want. And I suppose if they sit around long enough, they get recycled. But what actually happens at the recycling center are there like people that'll like hang out there, and they wait till a car drives up and brings in books, and then they just pounce. They just pounce on you, if you bring your books to the recycling center, and just take all the books that are any good. And the rest go up on the shelves to hang out for a while, set up there. And I actually found this on the shelf, which kind of surprised me. And I didn't need it, but you don't want M.R. James to get recycled. So I picked it up, and I'm glad I did, because now it's a book in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. The October book, appropriately enough. And then in November, When the Sleeper Wakes from H.G. Wells, an H.G. Wells science fiction novel that I have not read. So I'm really looking forward to this. That's going to be cool. And then Roger's Cheap Old Book Club in December closes out with No Name from Wilkie Collins. No Name. This is a pretty big book too, actually. This is how long? This is 600 pages, so we're going out with a long one. But Wilkie Collins is usually a lot of fun. So there's that. There's Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. But then there's lots of other stuff I'm going to be reading. If you want a more or less complete TBR, it would take too long, because this is a TBR, a physical TBR that I'm going to be reading for the next 6 or 7 years for I think the 500 book challenge might take me 6 or 7 years. Yeah, it's going to take a while. So if you want a complete TBR, Roger and I already filmed one, actually. It's not complete, but most of the stuff we're going to be reading, you can find in my series, The Books That Time Forgot, when I went through most of my books that I had packed away in boxes. It wasn't everything. But yeah, you could look at that. I did some shelf tours a while back with these. I'll be reading some of these up on the shelf. Most of what I'm going to be reading is from the Books That Time Forgot series, Halls of Adventure series, where we just bought a ton of books, many of which I haven't read, and also the Vintage Science Fiction Project. So, you know, these are just some random stuff. So, Books That Time Forgot series, I have a bunch of just old books lying around in those boxes. I will show you what I'm talking about if you haven't seen that series. Okay, so now we're just looking at an open box from the series, The Books That Time Forgot. I'm sure I talked about all of these books at some point in that series. And this box is pretty cool because it's got some Richard Matheson. And I do intend to revisit Richard Matheson. And I've got a bunch of his books in here. Richard Matheson's awesome. Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. This one, I really want to... did I ever read this at all, The Beardless Warriors? This is his World War II novel. And there's Gormenghast upside down. So, yeah, definitely want to revisit that series. I've talked about revisiting that series because I haven't read that since I was very young. I've got The Spider. This is Robot Titans of Gotham. And I've also got City of Doom. And so, you know, I've got so much stuff lying around, waiting to be read. What is this? Oh, yeah, Ross MacDonald's The Archer Files. These are the short stories of Ross MacDonald's famous Lou Archer. That's his Private Eye. Great series. Lou Archer series is great. And then, of course, I've got down here, I opened this up and laughed because, you know, it's the Kent Family Chronicles, which I really need to read. There's The Bastard is the first book. These were huge back in the, what was it, the 70s and into the early 80s, if I'm remembering right. And I think I remember seeing these books everywhere. I have the entire series here waiting to read. So, yeah, you know, lots of stuff, man. Got lots of stuff. So, you know, that was that. And also, I'm going to be really focusing on vintage science fiction. This is one of them. I did some videos on my vintage science fiction project. I'm trying to read all the vintage science fiction books that I own before I die. A tall order, but actually this move to physical books only for the 500 book challenge is actually going to help out in that department a lot. I'm going to be reading a lot of vintage science fiction. So there's a lot of weird stuff actually in the future. I'll give you just a little taste of that. Okay, so the Vintage Science Fiction Project I brought up from the vault of ancient science fiction. I have a vault in the Manor down below where I keep all my boxes of vintage science fiction, and these are some of them that I just brought up to the Manor so I could just not have to go down to the vault all the time. And so these actually will take a long, long time, just these few boxes here. And I'm working on this box now. So all of these boxes that I brought up from the vault and in the vault are full of mostly mass market paperbacks, but I do have some hardcovers as well. But the vast majority of what I have are these mass market paperbacks. And so I have to read, or I'm going to try to read, every single one of these before I die. That's the Vintage Science Fiction Project. So, and a lot of these are really strange and interesting, and yeah. So this should be fun. So this is the box that I'm working on. It's not all vintage science fiction. There's also some vintage horror and vintage fantasy as well in here. But the vast majority of it is vintage science fiction. So that's why I'm calling it the Vintage Science Fiction Project. Will I read it all before I die? We'll see. But moving to physical certainly will help this project along. Okay. Also, of course, some other things I'm working on. This shift to physical books is going to change up a couple things, most notably in the Edgar Rice Burroughs deep dive, which I'm still doing, where I'm going through all the Edgar Rice Burroughs books I own. But now, since I'm not reading ebooks, I'm only doing physical books. There are a couple books I don't own physically. And so, yeah, but they're not major, nothing from any of his major series or anything like that. So now the next book I'll be reading for Edgar Rice Burroughs is going to be this one. I'll be reading this very soon. This is Thuvia, Maid of Mars, book 4 in the Mars series. This was actually a really good book. It's been a long time since I've read this particular book, but it was pretty good. And so, yeah, that's the next one. And then after that, it's Pellucidar, the second book in Edgar Rice Burroughs' Inner World series. The Inner World, which is Pellucidar. Great Frank Frazetta cover on that one. So, with the exception of a couple books which I don't own physically, that shouldn't be affected too much. There are a lot of physical books I own, but the one thing that might be affected is Stephen King, but probably not for a while. I think I have most of his, if not all of his books from the 80s and 90s in physical form, and I'm so darn behind on this. I've been showing this book forever, saying, oh, I'm going to get to this book, and it's been like months. I know this book is supposed to be really, really good. I don't know that I've read it, or if I've read it, it was a long time ago. But yeah, different seasons, man. I will get to it. I promise. But yeah, the Stephen King project eventually, maybe in a couple years, will be affected. It depends on how quick I go through these. Hornblower series, got all of those, so no problems there. Sackett's, I don't have every book physically, but, you know, I've got some of them. So I'm going to keep reading the Sackett series when I get to them. I'm going to be starting reading some pulp books. Doc Savage, I've got a lot of Doc Savage. I've got a lot of The Shadow. I've got all of the paperbacks that were published for The Shadow. Not all of the Doc Savage books, because there were like a gazillion of those. And I also have some of The Spider. The Spider. So the pulp series should be going along just splendidly. I have tons of just random stuff. I've been intending to read this pulpy book. This looks kind of trashy, so this might wait for Garb August, the greatest reading event of all time created by CriminOlly, where in August we just read garbagey, trashy books. And there's a bunch of stuff, like there's some books on the shelves I need to get to. I've been talking about reading William Hope Hodgson. I have the collected works of William Hope Hodgson. And so I'm going to start reading all of those, which I've been wanting to do forever. Look at that shiny cover. Ooh, it's so pretty. I have every volume of his collected works. Finally going to be reading those and talking about those in the near future. But yeah, you know, physical books, all physical books. Roger wanted to sing Let's Get Physical, but that would be terrible, so.
Let me hear your dead body talk! Dead body talk! Let me hear your dead body talk!
Yeah, no, you don't want to hear that. You really don't. So, there you go. My physical TBR, more or less. Like I said, if you want a detailed TBR, check out my series, Books That Time Forgot, Halls of Adventure, Science Fiction Projects. You could find all of those in, I think I've got all those. Yeah, I've got all those I've got all those as playlists. That's the word I was thinking. I'm like, what were they? Playlists. I've got them. I got playlists for all those. You know, you can go watch them all for hours and hours. You know, watching me and Roger for hours. What could be better? Okay, guys, I will catch you tomorrow where I talk about books I should have DNF'd but didn't. Lots of crappy books tomorrow. Okay, guys, I'll see you then.